Welcome to Fluorescene.
Hi, I'm Dr. Alan Glazier, and welcome to the Fluorescene Show, Episode 9, Season 1. This week in ODs on Facebook, a doc posts that twice in one day with the same patient, something happened where he said, "Please read the 20/20 line," and the patient says, "I can't, doc." Doc says, "Not even a guess?" Patient quickly reads TZVEC. The doc posts an anger emoji in response. Someone commented, "It's like their job to annoy us." Another doc said, "Not so odd," and intimated, considering that there's a 1 in 26 to the 5th power, she actually guessed correctly. That's one outlook. Another doc pointed out, you can always threaten them with the drops. And we've all done what the next doc suggested. He handles it by saying, "It's okay. Let me give you an easier one." Then you hit the button to randomize the 20/20 line, and they rattle it off. Never forget, we're psychologists first. Or then they're the ones who say, "Oh, I don't plan on ever reading anything that small." Whatever it is, my advice, and the advice of several others in the thread, is never show the 20/20 line until the end, because, as one doc points out, you put up a chart with 2015 on the bottom, and magically they can read 20/20. Makes no sense. A doc reported something a new patient asked. "Will you be diluting my eyes today?" And of course, we got great responses that covered the gamut of the multitudes of misdirected comments and mispronounced words we encounter regularly in clinic. For instance, all of us have had reports of a family history of macular degeneration. And we've all seen a patient who was diagnosed with stigmata, not to mention Cadillacs. Then there's the famous macular degeneration. And like me, a doc said, "I don't even correct them anymore." Yes, we'll be diluting your eyes today. "We might have a live one coming in today," a doc posts. And then the image. "That's a contact lens fit right there. I'm sure there'll be no problem." A doc responded, "I had a husband and wife come in, called them in reverse order from what the appointment schedule said. And the husband got upset and refused to be seen because of that." Issues. Now, this post was just another awesome image by Trey Sullins, who has posted at least 3 of the best images that I've seen lately. It's radial transillumination defects of pigmentary glaucoma, and nothing much to say about it other than, "Wow, Trey, you take one heck of an image. Good work, doc." A doc posts that while going through some old boxes, he found a vintage Barnes Hine soft-made thermal contact lens disinfecting unit. He wanted to know if anyone else in the community was old enough to remember, when these were used for disinfection regularly. Unfortunately, I was one of them that do remember, and other docs reminded us how old we are with other things that make us realize how long we've been around, like the units that plug directly into a wall, and then they would short out, and then there were ones you couldn't go camping with because you needed an outlet just to clean your contact. Then there was the new and improved unit that you could plug directly into an electrical socket, and somebody one-upped that with a comment on the even earlier days where you actually made your own saline using distilled water and salt tablets and put the case in a baby bottle warmer type disinfecting unit. Wow, that's even older than me. So we've got another great show for you tonight. We welcome Dr. John Gellis, specialty lens thought leader and director of the Specialty Contact Lens Division of the Cornea and Laser Eye Institute located in Teaneck, New Jersey. Dr. Ed Boshnick, also a leading specialist in specialty contact lenses, is here, and he shares his new show segment. We call it Captivating Corneas, where he shares really fascinating cases. Our segment on eye care news and more tonight, so stay tuned and be sure to subscribe to the channel so that you get updates as we post new shows. I'm here today with Dr. John Gellis. John is the director of the Specialty Contact Lens Division of the Cornea and Laser Eye Institute in Teaneck, New Jersey.
He graduated from University of Oregon and received his optometry degree from the Pennsylvania College of Optometry. He's a clinical assistant professor at Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School, and an adjunct clinical professor at SUNY College of Optometry, ICO, and NECO. He's a fellow and board member of the Contact Lens Society of America, an executive board member of the International Keratoconus Academy, a fellow of the International Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control, a fellow of the Scleral Lens Society, the British Contact Lens Association, and an advisory board member for the Gas Permeable Lens Institute. He's a frequent author in several medical journals and professional publications. He's an investigator for multiple clinical trials and a consultant for industry companies, and has received numerous awards and accolades. Welcome, John. Wow. And I just want to say, your accomplishments in the field of specialty lenses are super impressive. You know, not only have you embraced specialty contact lenses, but your depth of experience extends beyond the clinic to research, to innovation. Lots of experts in specialty lenses are experts in a particular subset, the sclerals or ortho-K or one or the other, but you run the gamut, your expertise. So you sure know your way around a cornea. Tell me, when is the book and the movie coming out?
Well, I don't know about a book or a movie. I don't think I'm that interesting, but yeah, thank
You
you
know
for
that
the
about
kind
yourself.
words.
You know all that about yourself. You should start there. Now, you sound like you're being modest now. I guess a good place for us to start today is with personal questions so the viewers get to know you, and you're like absent on social media. So I just have to ask you questions about things I know about you and have you fill in the blanks. You're an Oregon Duck, but where'd you grow up, and walk us through your pre-optometry days and what drove you into the profession?
Yeah, so I grew up in Southern California in San Diego. I had been born in Hawaii, lived in San Francisco. Kind of being around San Diego, did typical Southern California things, played a lot of golf, enjoyed the ocean a little bit. Oregon was kind of a decision of, look, we went on this road trip that was, up the coast of California all the way to Washington, Seattle, Washington. We stopped at every Pac-10 school and, pretty much all the schools on the way. And I ended up at Oregon kind of on a whim. It was the the campus I liked the most, and kind of went with, oh, this is great. And, of course, we visited during summer when it's beautiful and sunny there rather than overcast and rainy. So it's kind of a funny thing. But, growing up, though, in San Diego, I had a good friend whose dad was an optometrist, and he kind of, he was one of the most interesting people. He's still, like, the guy had just plethora of guitars, like loved blues music. Was just a really great guy, and kind of lived a storied life. And I was like, oh, maybe there's something to that. My dad was a prosthodontist at the VA in La Jolla, so I kind of always had the interest in medicine. And but I loved cars. Like, cars were like, I just loved them. And I had considered going into automotive design, and my uncle was good friends with Franz van Holhausen, the guy who designs Teslas.
Wow.
So we had a quick meeting with him to talk about automotive design, and he goes, well, the average automotive designer does, their day looks like this, and they're kind of under very strict restrictions on what they can design and what they're going to design, and they have to work on these very, very narrow things. And I was just going, well, that's just not what I want to do. And, so anyway, yeah, so that was kind of the pre-Oregon life.
Yeah. You got to optometry school, and tell us about how you felt then.
Oh yeah, so optometry school was kind of an interesting thing. I ended up on optometry because in Oregon there was a course called Introduction to the Health Professions. Previously I thought I wanted to do like plastics and reconstructive, but I shadowed at a couple of private practices in plastics, and it was heavy plastics and not really something that I saw myself doing. This course, ended up being, they get 3 physicians in there, and they talk about what they do. And, the guys who seem to have, the best personality, I guess you would say it, and the most passion for what they did were an optometrist and an ophthalmologist. And I started thinking, okay, well, maybe there's something to this. Matt's dad always seemed so happy, and these guys seemed very, very interested in it. And they were talking about the toys and technologies that go into these things, and I was just kind of like, this is intriguing. So, and while I was in college, I had taken a whole bunch of various different courses that were, physiology based and chemistry based, but also, business and design. And, there wasn't really a good understanding for kind of what I wanted to do. I wasn't really sure what that was. And, I liked optometry, and I thought, okay, this is a quick route to be a doctor, and, something that I'm interested in, and we'll go that route. So, I applied to school, I went to PCO, and, once I was in my first year, I was going, I don't know that I like this.
Yikes.
Yeah. And, I was considering dropping out.
I guess if you got to figure that out, first year is the time to figure
yeah,
that out.
yeah, that saved myself, a couple more years worth of student loans, but it was very serendipitous that I ended up, in my second year. I guess you start in your clinical rotations, and in your own clinic at the school run clinic at TEI, and I happened to be in the emergency department, and there was this young woman who had this just horrendous Pseudomonas ulcer. I'd never seen anything like that. It was just wild, and I'm watching the attending do the cultures and everything around this, and I'm starting to go, wow, this is fascinating, and this is within optometry, this is within the scope. And I'm kind of looking at this going, a lot of what we were learning was kind of these identifying disease processes that you couldn't really do too much about. You couldn't really intervene in them. You could just really say, well, we found this, we're going to follow it, and a good day is it didn't get any worse. Whereas, this was, watching something where we had something that was horribly painful and, really, really going to be impactful to this individual's life. But, a culture and, properly chosen antibiotics later, I got lucky enough to see her again 2 weeks later, and, the infection was cleared, and yeah, it was, just a really impactful moment where I was going, okay, well, there's something to cornea, cornea is really interesting now. And then kind of contact lenses followed into that.
Tell us about the practice and how you've differentiated yourself, how you worked your way in, and then how you became I think you're the director of specialty lenses at the whole practice now.
Yeah. So, kind of, it was well, long time in the making, I guess. Moshe was very, very generous with me when I was in his practice and allowed me to virtually see any specialty lens that came into the practice. So he was at the time doing his MBA, and had kind of stepped back from seeing patients on a full-time basis. So virtually any patient that was wearing a lens, was now my patient to take care of. So, I took over his whole load that was, at the time, I think like 20 or 25 years worth of orthokeratology patients and, specialty contact lens patients. And then, his partner was a cornea specialist. So I just had just a slew of irregular corneas and just all sorts of stuff. And that was what kind of built the interest in that. Essentially, I had what would have been an equivalent of like a 2-year residency of nothing but specialty lenses. So it was really, really interesting. And then when I moved over here, I had gotten a job with a surgeon in Manhattan who Greg Pamel, who was a part of the cornea contact lens residency for SUNY. So I'd worked with him on the cornea side of things, the cornea refractive side of things, and did his specialty contact lenses in his place. And, it really got me some opportunities because he was an investigator in cross-linking. And one of the people that he had worked with was, or had worked closely with, was John Candelopoulos, who had done, obviously a lot of work in cross-linking and topography guided PRK for irregular corneas. And, so I had gotten into this practice, and then I had taken an interview with Peter, at sometime during that period of time. And, at the time he wasn't hiring. He actually was just kind of seeing what sort of talent was out there. And, I'm at the interview and he tells me that. I was just kind of like, oh, bummer. And, a year later, he calls me back and he goes, hey, I'd like you to come on and, and run contact lenses. And I'm like, okay, cool. That was, kind of the genesis of that. And then I've been here, 5 or 6 years, I think, at this point. And
that's awesome.
yeah.
You're seeing patients, obviously, and running the clinic, and you're involved in a lot of clinical trials. I know from our conversations. Does that interfere with your clinical practice, and how did you get into it? And I know that a lot of our viewers are curious about that. I've done a few. I opted not to do it because of the way it interrupted my practice and my earning of revenue. To just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. For us, we are not, and this is what I found very, very interesting when I came into Peter's practice and talked with him. I was kind of under the impression that everybody kind of wanted the same thing, which was that you were, efficient, you could see a lot of patients, you could do these sorts of things. And Peter didn't care about any of that. Peter goes, I don't care how much time you take. I want you to be the best. Wow. And I was just taken aback. I was, okay. And, he started telling me about, him and, his background. And, he was just pure cornea. This guy was, Princeton, Hopkins, double Harvard, and had stayed on, at Harvard to do cornea. And, kind of grew up, in the technology. He was the PI and the first author on the first excimer laser to be FDA approved. So, and then had been the primary on, a bunch of other, refractive related clinical trials. So he was kind of one of those, prolific guys, but he stayed super focused to just cornea. That's all he did, cornea transplants, various types of corneal refractive surgeries, and that was it. And, coming into that kind of gave me some perspective as to what I wanted to do, which was, I didn't want to do primary care. I didn't want to do any of the things that didn't interest me. I wanted to do exclusively contact lens. And that's what this practice has allowed me to do.
You also are education chair of the Intrepid Eye Society. Tell our viewers about Intrepid, about your mission. And I think you have an April symposia come up. Let's tell us everything about that.
Yeah. So Intrepid is, originally founded by Michael Cooper and Justin Schweitzer, kind of a young group of thought leaders, modeled after Vanguard and Apex in ophthalmology. So the idea of getting together, young thought leaders to try and push forward optometry in this case. And, with, kind of all sorts of disciplines. So you have people who are in hospital settings, you have people who are in private practice, people who are in group or solo practice, those who are in states with, procedural, like Oklahoma or Kentucky, where they have, lasers and other sorts of advanced procedures, and, everything from contact lens to dry eye to primary care to practice management. All of these are represented as individuals and their specialties within this society. So starting kind of in the pandemic last year, or rather prior to, myself and Michael Cooper had talked quite extensively about starting to do education with this. And it wasn't until the pandemic that we really had time to start focusing on this. The nice thing about it was we had total anonymity, and we have just a massive deck of thought leaders for us. So we just started putting on monthly COPE-approved webinars. And they've been very well received. So we started discussing the idea of, well, let's do an actual symposia on this. So on April 9th and 10th, we're going to be doing a 14-hour credit hour symposia that will cover, gosh, I think the topics are glaucoma, which will have Justin and Nate Lighthizer and Mitch Eibach all on it. Dry eye, which will be Damon Durker, Vin Dang, Tracy Dahl, and Leslie Odell. And in the contact lens section, you'll have Melissa Barnett, myself, Beta Ascari, and Aaron McNulty. You're going to have full gamut of individuals on this, and we'll have some of our advisors giving lectures, kind of giving a global perspective on eye care. It should give a pretty well-rounded education, and for 14 hours of time, it should be able to give you a really nice education within that and give you some interesting perspectives. So.
Sounds like you got a bunch of lightweights up there. Those are heavy hitters. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you're also the education chair of the International Keratoconus Academy.
Yes.
About that.
Yeah, so IKA was founded by Barry Iden, and the executive. Pardon?
Lightweight, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Barry, love you, man. He's a great guy.
Barry, I love you. So basically IKA was built on the idea of, increasing awareness around keratoconus and the education around keratoconus. And really with the advent of the newer procedures and the newer technologies to diagnose the disease, because prior to 2016, there was really no approved treatment in the United States to be able to stop the disease. It used to be a disease where we would say, well, you're finally telling me that you're having, decreasing levels of vision, your glasses are changing, and, we'd find keratoconus on a topography, and we'd say, okay, well, we can correct you with a GP, but we can't do anything to stop your disease. And, last resort is a keratoplasty. And, we'd see these individuals on, a 1-year basis because that's all we could do at the time. Whereas now we have very sophisticated pieces of equipment that can catch this before there's any symptoms of the disease. Once you've found this disease, we actually have a treatment now that can stop it from getting worse, which is corneal collagen cross-linking. You have things like various types of contact lenses that we may not have used before, where we may have looked at only corneal gas permeables as being the really good option there. Whereas now we have modern scleral lenses, we have hybrid lenses, custom soft lenses, all sorts of different options for them. And then in the surgical aspect of it, there's also topography guided PRK, or intact procedures, or a tissue inlay that we're actually investigating here. There's a lot of different things that you can do for these individuals that are not a keratoplasty to improve their vision. So the mission of IKA is really to get that information to the practitioners and make them aware of this, especially when you're working with a pediatric population, because that's where keratoconus develops. These individuals don't just show up at 25 years old with a advanced disease. It started at some time. So
right.
Knowing how to diagnose that is important.
The conversation's amazing. If we had this conversation, as early as 2007, it was Rose K lenses and ultimately a PK.
Yeah.
So wow, that's fantastic. Well, that's a great segue into the clinical trial you're involved in on scleral lenses. What can we look forward to coming out of that?
Yeah. So the clinical trial that we're using right now is looking at wavefront guided optics for scleral lenses. So this has been research that's been done in various different universities. You really have to, acknowledge the work of, Jason Marsack and Ray Applegate's work down at Houston, and then Gen-Young Yoon's work up at University of Rochester. And that really has been the kind of basis for the study that we're working on right now. So there's a company that's working on commercialization of a full system to be able to create these lenses, and that is the Ovitz X-Wave system. So we're using that to be able to compare differences between a habitual, standard optical correction on a scleral lens versus this wavefront guided higher order aberration correcting scleral lens. So like if you look with the scleral lens, you'll have some of those patients with advanced keratoconus that you put the lens on, and they're still not going to get down to 20/20. They'll tell you that their vision is better, but it's still not great. They have still halos and flaring glare. And what this is doing is further reducing that halo and flaring glare and giving them even better vision. So it's really exciting, and the results so far have been very similar to the published literature out there on this, and it's been highly successful. I'm really optimistic for this.
Pros. Tell me about pros.
Yeah, so pros being prosthetic replacement of ocular surface ecosystem. So essentially, it's the use of a large diameter prosthetic lens that's filled very much same device category as a scleral lens, but pros is really a treatment rather than just the lens itself. Pros is really the use of a pros device for the treatment of ocular surface disease mostly. And the treatment course on this is essentially a rapid treatment course, being that you're going to see this patient day after day for maybe a week to 10 days and ensure that they're healing underneath the lens, that the lens is doing well, and follow up within that individual to ensure that their awful ocular surface condition is going to be healing. When you look at the majority of scleral lenses are used for irregular surfaces, right? For keratoconus, ectasias of various different matters or post-surgical conditions, scarring, that sort of stuff. Whereas the vast majority of pros are used for severe ocular surface disease, and that would be patients, with limbal stem cell deficiencies or diseases that involve autoimmune conditions such as Sjogren's or cicatricial pemphigoid, or any one of those sorts of autoimmune diseases that are severely affecting the ocular surface. This is not run-of-the-mill dry eye. These are persistent epithelial defects in somebody who has lost the ability to blink due to to blink or feel due to like a 5/7 palsy. So these are severe cases. So that's really what pros is used for in its most effective manner is for that sort of pros treatment.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting, and we're going to wrap it up soon. I know I just want to go back to a little bit of I like to start personally and end personally. I know cars are a passion of yours.
Yes.
I want to know something else that's a passion of yours, and I want to know what you drive. I'm sure everybody wants to know what you drive. When you say cars are a passion, what are you getting behind when you get off of this call?
Well, believe it or not, I am not all that interesting in the car that I own. And that is because partially I live in Manhattan, but also because, necessity is not going to allow me to drive, a really, really fun car. Now, I can appreciate, Italian design and the, Ferraris and Lamborghinis and things like that, but my interest has actually always been in rally cars. So, people get their rocks off on Lambos and Ferraris and stuff like that. I'm very, very interested in subcompact cars that have four-wheel drive on them, and 600 horsepower four-cylinder engines. So
Yeah, check a friend into that. Anthony, he's an OD, Anthony Favali, and down in
no
Chapter.
joke.
So I get in, and I think Avi's Latin. They're both my classmates too, which is interesting.
Yeah, Avi is actually right. His practice is actually like 10 blocks from my home, which is
Great guy, good friend. Both Necco 93, all three of us Necco 93. So
no joke. Oh,
yeah,
that's funny. Yeah.
And your family. Tell us about your family.
Oh yeah, so my parents are still in San Diego. My sister and I are actually the only ones on the East Coast, and I'm in Manhattan, she's in Brooklyn, and she's a ceramicist, and actually has a cake business that's been kind of interesting. So she's had this, what started as kind of a home creation sort of thing called Cakes for Sport, and it's now been featured in like the Times and Time Out New York and all these other things, and it's been very, very very interesting to watch. This Instagram that was like 100 people to like I don't even know how many thousands of people following it. It's
Give us the IG handle and give us the website, and we'll give her a little plug.
Yeah, I think it's at Cakes for the number and Sport.
There's the number again. Cakes for
Sport. Yeah.
Sport.
Sport.
What's
Yeah.
the angle? How is it different?
It's all about these kind of very maximalist cakes. She's combining these flavors that are just off the wall, that are very, very interesting. She had one that was like a hibiscus pomegranate and something spicy within it, and then she'll find these ingredients that are just out there, and then the decorations on them are just wild. So it's it very much also follows this kind of art form. Like she was recently featured in a art magazine, so it's very, very interesting stuff. Very, very, very cool.
Very creative too. Very creative.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I know you're a busy guy, and thank you for taking time out of your day to come and talk to our viewers and share your expertise. I really have so many more questions to ask you, but there's only so much time that people are going to pay attention. So
yeah, right.
I'd love to have you back. So
yeah, anytime. We'd be happy to discuss. We should do it over scotch next time.
Absolutely. And I'm in New York all the time, so maybe
Perfect.
next time I'm up there, I think it's in a couple weeks. Let's hang out.
Perfect. Sounds great, Al.
Thanks, and have a great day, and stay safe. Okay.
You too.
Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of the Fluorescene News. Good evening, I'm Dr. Alan Glazier. In legislative news, the Mississippi Senate passed a House bill that expanded the scope of practice for optometrists, including the ability to prescribe certain medications and perform specific procedures. Specifically, House Bill 1302 provides improved pharmaceutical authority and includes oral steroids, grants optometrists injectable authority, allows for excision and removal of Glazier, removal of non-cancerous growths in and around the eyelid, and laser capsulotomies. There was fierce opposition to this legislation, with many speaking out against the increase in access to care during multiple committee hearings, through lobbyists, and even through use of billboards around the Capitol building. Through perseverance and dedication, not to mention what the citizens of the state of Mississippi realized was in their own best interest, optometry prevailed. Congratulations to our Mississippi colleagues, the Mississippi Optometric Association, and everyone else who played a role. In neuro news, newly published research has revealed a close link between proteins associated with Alzheimer's disease and age-related sight loss. Amyloid beta proteins are the primary driver of Alzheimer's disease, but also begin to collect in the retina as people get older. Donor eyes from patients who suffered from age-related macular degeneration, the most common cause of blindness amongst adults in the UK, have been shown to contain high levels of amyloid beta proteins in their retinas. This new study published in the journal Cells builds on previous research showing amyloid beta proteins collect around the retinal pigment epithelium to establish the damage these toxic proteins cause RPE cells. The researchers hope that one of the next steps could be for anti-amyloid beta drugs previously trialed in Alzheimer's patients to be repurposed and trialed as possible treatment for AMD. In general health news, specifically breast cancer, new research from the University at Buffalo suggests that breast cancer patients who drink sugar-sweetened beverages regularly are at increased risk for death from breast cancer of varying types. Compared to women who never or rarely drank regular sugar-sweetened soda, those who reported drinking regular sugar-sweetened soda 5 times or more per week had a 62% higher likelihood of dying from any causes and were 85% more likely to die from breast cancer specifically. The associations did not change when researchers included diet soda consumption as a variable. The findings were published online in the journal Cancer Epidemiology, Biomarkers and Prevention. In COVID eye-related news, a recent study reported in Neuroradiology found that ocular nodules were found in the posterior pole and outside of the macular region of post-COVID patients. A team of investigators studied a cohort of 147 patients with severe COVID-19 infections who had undergone magnetic resonance imaging between March 4th and May 1st. 129 patients comprised the study cohort in this retrospective observational multi-center study. Ocular nodules were identified on MRI in 9 patients. All of them, 100% of the patients, had nodules in the macular region, 89% had bilateral nodules, and 22% had nodules outside the macular region. 3 of the patients had undergone ophthalmologic examinations during which the nodules were not visible. The investigators suggested a few hypotheses for the origins of the nodules that included direct retinal and retinal pigment epithelial infiltration by the virus, vasculitis, or an autoimmune process, an ocular microangiopathic syndrome ultimately resulting in retinal ischemia and a Valsalva retinopathy secondary to orbital proptosis that occurs when the ocular venous system is affected by increased central venous pressure, leading to an inadequate ocular venous drainage seen in patients who are prone or intubated. In glaucoma news, the presence of visual field defects in glaucoma is the major predictive factor of depressive symptoms, trait anxiety, and overall sleep disturbance. A cross-sectional study investigated the prevalence of depression, anxiety, and disturbed sleep among glaucoma patients, and the presence of severe visual field defects as well. Their hypothesis suggests that individuals with severe visual field defects show higher rates of depression, anxiety, and sleep disturbance compared with a control group. Patients with glaucoma and severe visual field defects show a higher prevalence of these symptoms versus a group with or without minor visual field defects, and both groups show a generally high prevalence. Given that depression has been found to be associated with poor therapeutic adherence in glaucoma patients, this could lead to a vicious circle and a generally unfavorable treatment outcome. Currently, standard ophthalmological care for glaucoma consists mainly of the management of IOP. Considering the high prevalence of depression and sleep disorders among glaucoma patients, there is reason for at least routine screening concerning these conditions. In dry eye news, significant improvement in signs and symptoms of meibomian gland dysfunction were achieved with a topical ointment, thus meeting the primary endpoints of the drug's Phase 2 trial. Azura Ophthalmics announced in a press release in the multi-center double-masked vehicle-controlled integrated analysis of 4 separate Phase 2 studies, up to 46% of patients achieved a clinically meaningful increase in the number of glands secreting meibum, compared with 8% in the control group, the release said. No serious ocular treatment emergent adverse events were reported. Application site irrigation, stinging on application, and watery eyes were reported only in the 1% dose group. In neurogenetics news, when central nervous system cells in the brain and spine are damaged by disease or injury, they fail to regenerate, limiting the body's ability to recover. In contrast, peripheral nerve cells that serve most other areas of the body are able to regenerate. Scientists for decades have searched for molecular clues as to why axons cannot repair themselves after stroke, spinal cord damage, or traumatic brain injuries. In a massive screen of 400 mouse genes, Yale School of Medicine researchers have identified 40 genes actively involved in suppression of axon regeneration in CNS system cells. By editing out one of those genes, they were able to restore axons in ocular nerves of mice damaged by glaucoma. Further research will explore how modifying or blocking those 40 genes might affect the repair of neurons damaged by stroke, and traumatic brain and spinal cord injuries. And that's it for the Fluorescene News. Now on with the show.
Dr. Ed Boshnick, and I appreciate being invited to present a very interesting clinical case on the Fluorescene website. This is a story of about a patient, a 60-year-old woman with an acoustic neuroma. So 20 years ago, she had this tumor removed, and after the tumor was removed, she was unable to close her right eye completely. And over the years, the cornea started going south, and ulcerations and very dry eye. She came to see me around 3 years ago, and I explained what we could do for her with a scleral lens, and she got a little frightened and thought about it and decided not to pursue this. And last summer, things got worse for her, and her corneal surgeon asked her to come and see me. And during that time, he put on Oxervate also. So I fit her with a scleral lens, but when she first came to see me, this is how her cornea looked. You can see how nasty this surface is. You can barely see the pupil. And we took an image with the keratograph. You can see ulceration here. And then we put a scleral lens on, and you can see how the surface is very distorted, very it's pretty irritated. So anyway, about 4 weeks into fitting her with a scleral lens, the surgeon, the corneal specialist, wanted to concentrate just on the Oxervate. So we stopped with the scleral lens fitting, took a break for about 2 months, and then we restarted again several months later, around October of last year. So this is, again, how her cornea looked in the beginning. The Oxervate really didn't do much to help her out. So we did this in sequence. So approximately 6 weeks after we started fitting her with a scleral lens, it started clearing up a little bit. You can see the difference here. And also with the keratograph, you can see the ulcerations have significantly gone away. The cornea's cleared up. And again, several months later, you can see how the cornea is less disruptive. Several months later, the cornea continues to clear up, and you can see the neovascularization, the scarring is getting better, and the ocular surface, in this image taken with the keratograph, looks better too. And then finally, earlier this year, in January, we took further images. Again, here you can see the scleral lens. Now you can see the pupil. There's a dramatic change in that, in the appearance of a cornea with the scleral lens. And look with the OCT. Look at the corneal surface. If you compare it to how it was in the beginning, can we move over here? Look, this is how it was when we first met her. And then approximately 5 or 6 months later, it's so much clearer. And this is the scleral lens. We used a one-fit scleral lens made by Blanchard Laboratory. And when the patient first came to see us, visual acuity in the very beginning was basically finger counting. You can barely see the pupil here. With the overrefraction with the scleral lens, she was seeing 20/20 minus with this eye, with this lens. So it's just a great case and a great demonstration of a therapeutic ability of a well-designed and fit scleral lens. Lens fits nicely, everything looks good, and the patient wears the lens, and she has a great comfort with the lens too. Before her eye, she had a lot of discomfort and pain. Well, actually, the sensory nerve endings were damaged, so she wasn't able to experience much pain with this eye, but she was more comfortable, and a dramatic improvement in her visual acuity. So that's all I have to say about the tremendous life-changing ability of a scleral lens.